Hi, everybody, and welcome back to EBNet Stream. I was privileged to listen to a very, very interesting conversation at the recent Batseta Winter Conference. And I thought I'd invite one of the speakers from that session to join me today over a cup of coffee to explain a concept and a thought that I think we're all having, but probably not understanding to the degree we should be. So Chetan Ramlall, the head of quantitative research, systematic solutions at Stanlib. I think I got it right. Welcome to EBNet Stream.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for having me. It's really a privilege to be here.
Lovely. Thank you for accepting my invitation. Just to set the scene, at Batseta, you and your colleague presented, I want to say, a test case or a use case when it comes to AI and pension fund investing. So there's a lot of words in that kind of topic. And perhaps we can start at the beginning and really explain where is AI and LLMs, which you guys chatted about as well, but where is the investment management industry when it comes to the use of this kind of new tech?
No, it's such a clearly a topic I'm very excited about, and I think it's a topic that is just becoming more and more prevalent wherever you look. If it's on social media, in the news, and even at professional levels in firms and in enterprises. AI is, I think, very firmly moved away from the realm of just jargon and buzzwords and actually becoming real. And I think over the last 2 or 3 years, we've really seen that cement itself, not just sort of a fad, but actually changing the structure of how we do business, how we interact with people, and also the value it's unlocking for businesses. So I think in the investment management space, and let's say broadly at a more financial services level, the effects are huge. And AI is actually going beyond just financial services. It's touching all sectors, from engineering to medicine, wherever it is that you might be looking. But within financial services, from banking to asset management to retirement funds to the life insurance sector, with each passing month almost, companies are adopting this technology. They are seeing the benefits it can unlock, the efficiencies it can unlock, and then as well as what that might translate to its clients. And all the way along the value chain, we are sort of moving into this new exciting world. And I think it's those who are adopting it quickly and are sort of getting onto the train that are going to get the biggest advantage.
I think when we were listening to yourself and your colleague talk at Batseta, there was a lot of unpacking of some of the jargon. And one of the things that stuck in my mind is this concept of cloud computing. And we think investment management, or kind of my understanding of investment management, having spent only a brief 5 years in the industry because I'm so young still, is that you'd have a team of investment professionals or statisticians and economists. They'd be reviewing a whole pile of data. They're then informing a portfolio manager who's then making the kind of asset selections and choices. How does cloud computing change that?
So cloud computing has just been an absolute game changer. So if you look at sort of traditional ways of work and how business used to be done and how tech was done, companies used to have these massive servers to store data, and those servers would sit in their offices. There'd be massive amounts of capex spent, so millions of rands or dollars, whatever it may be, to build these servers on site and on premises. But the problem was that's a lot of money being spent, and oftentimes for all that extra computation ability and storage, it might not always be used. And probably about 20 years ago, this shift into cloud really started to pick up. And in the last 10 years, it's really exploded. Because what cloud computing has done, it's made it so much more cost effective for managers to harness the power of the internet and to store and compute on a much more pay as you use basis. So what that means is that costs are coming down from investing capex, but at the same time, you can use much more computation at your fingertips if you do need it. And what that sort of dovetailed and links with is the explosion of data we've seen. So I would say over the last 20, 25 years, the world has just absolutely exploded in terms of the amount of data being produced. It's quite a very, it's very interesting statistic, which I like to quote. there's a unit of measurement known as a zettabyte. Okay, and a zettabyte is a massive amount of data. It's equivalent to 1 trillion gigabytes. Okay, I think all of us have got our cell phones. We know it has 120 gigabytes or 250 gigabytes. Imagine 1 trillion gigabytes. And the world, for context, in 2010 produced about 1 zettabyte of data. So that's us as humanity over the
Mm.
internet. That's how much data we produced. As of 2025, we currently in the ballpark of 200 zettabytes being produced. So it's an absolutely exponential level of growth. And a nice way for the viewers to also conceptualize how big this is. If you think of a byte of data as a grain of sand, then 1 zettabyte is as many grains of sand are there as there are on all the world's beaches. So it's truly mind-boggling. And that just means the tools we need, so for example, cloud computing, have to come to the fore because the traditional methods won't cut it anymore.
Mm. There's just too much information, right?
That's it. That's it.
So I always remember investment managers and the kind of commentary in the press when I was growing up in my consulting role in employee benefits and investments. I always remember the analogy of, getting a monkey to throw a dart at a dartboard to pick portfolios and stocks and kind of measuring that and kind of tongue in cheek saying, oh, the monkey would have done better than, the highest paid asset manager. Are we getting to a state or a phase in business where AI is starting to choose portfolios and choose underlying stocks and bonds and asset classes?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, actually, Natalie. If you look at what this technology is capable of on a very superficial surface level, one can easily say yes. However, the problem is it's not about the effectiveness of it. That's where the human comes into it. So, what I rather focus and actually show the point is that AI, machine learning, and these technologies are actually tools which augment our skills as asset managers and as financial professionals. The problem is, in the example that you sketched out, if you let an algorithm run wild and pick a portfolio, pick stocks, that never works. And we've seen it. There's been real life examples of people trying that. So, what we've rather seen is that combining that skill of the human and using the tools that these new technologies provide, that can augment the skill set. And that's actually what leads to better portfolio outcomes, risk management, and so forth. It's not just AI sort of running loose and picking stocks that's going to get you the success. Again, so superficially, it can be implemented, but it's not going to be effective. And that's really where the key is. It's about how do we harness these tools, whether we're asset managers, whether we're life insurance professionals, whether we're retirement fund trustees or professionals. Let's try and use these skills, augment what we bring to the table as humans, and use that combined skill set to deliver a better outcome for clients. That's really the world we are moving into.
One thing I was thinking of when we were talking about zettabytes and the availability of information, and now adding in your commentary around human overlay, discretion, discernment, ethics to some degree. If we're sitting in an environment where all this information is available and all this information is available to all, are we not going to land up in a scenario where all portfolios deliver the same thing? I mean, if you're managing to a kind of a standard mandate, are not all balanced market portfolios going to end up delivering the same thing?
No, not necessarily. Again, this is where, as a human, we bring our skill to the fore. The world is still highly complex. And
Mm.
I think it's important also to say that at this point in the cycle, as exciting as these technologies are, we're very much at the bottom of this J curve of advancement. So there's still a lot of runway still to come. These technologies are developing rapidly, but it's only really the last 2 or 3 years where some of these models and architectures have started to deliver performance. There's a lot of research still going into them, optimizing parameters, making them more robust. I'm sure some of the viewers would have seen on the internet that there are sometimes simple tasks where these models fail, which maybe as a human we can rationalize and figure it out. But at this current point, the models still aren't strong enough to do those things. So I think if you look over a longer time horizon, think of these as tools, but us as humans and as skilled professionals in whatever aspect of the value chain we might be in, it still needs that human overlay and oversight to actually get an optimal outcome. And I'll keep coming back to that point. It's not just about an outcome. An outcome is not sort of useful in any sense. You want something that's effective and optimal.
Mm.
And it's that combination of man and machine that will actually get us there.
Mm. I'm going to ask you a question that may be difficult to answer, but it touches on the point you raised at the beginning of our conversation around, we always used to say 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Now it's almost month by month. And reading the press this morning around what's happening in Israel and Iran, it's almost hour by hour. But these technologies are developing very fast. Regulation, it's my understanding and my impression that regulation is not developing as quickly. So who's the boss of the game, right? Who's monitoring the ethics? Who's monitoring the responsible use of this technology?
No, that's such an important point, Natalie. It's coming up all the time. Like you said, in the news, you see it. You've seen sovereigns and countries also express concern. And the truth and the short answer is it's a very valid concern. It's the first time, or one of the first times in human history, where the technology we're trying to regulate is developing so rapidly that regulation can't keep up, as much as people are trying. So that naturally does lead to a few questions and concerns, of course. But saying that people are trying. So, for example, in the EU, they've undertaken the EU AI Act a few months ago. That's being rolled out across many countries, and the focus is how do you safely deploy these models? There are committees being set up for example, AI oversight in the EU. That's also being linked to committees being set up in the US. I think even under the Biden administration, back in January of this year, there were some policies set out just to govern safety around AI. How do you deploy it? To your earlier question, what happens if you just let an AI run loose on the market and do all kinds of strange things? That can disrupt financial markets and cause chaos. So the point is, people are very aware of this and they are trying to get these regulations in place, and it is happening. It might not be happening at the pace we'd like, but it is happening. But I also understand that it's a very tricky situation because, to my earlier point, we are almost trying to regulate something we don't know exactly how it works yet. And that's kind of the concern. A regulation will be developed on something, and then there'll be a breakthrough, and something completely changes with how these models interact, for example, which means that a regulation that was valid a month ago might not be valid a month later because the technology has changed. So it's kind of this weird catch-22 situation. But I think people shouldn't be fearful. We are working, there are very smart people that are in the space monitoring safety. And I think with each passing month and each passing year, we will be getting better at it. So it's not as if no one's looking at it, but I think it's a valid concern, but it's going to be addressed and people are actively working on it.
To ask a cheeky question, and I'm not going to pretend it's my question. It was actually one of the trustees at Batseta who asked you the self-same question. You spoke earlier of the economies that are achieved by using things like AI and LLMs, and the cheeky question was, will that result in cheaper fees?
Yeah, very, very, very relevant, of course. And I think, if you think of the efficiencies that are unlocked, as I said, the space itself is developing. So all of us, wherever we are in that value chain, are also trying to figure out how that's going to augment and improve our processes. Naturally, if efficiencies are there, what does that also mean in terms of, let's say, investment performance or risk management? And I think over the long arc of time, naturally, this does seem to have a downward pressure on the fees if you get these efficiency unlocks that are expected. But I think in the same breath, we have to be cautious because, like I said, we as humans are very much part of this equation. So those that actually differentiate themselves are those who can actually use this technology and get those outcomes. So it's not as simple as saying that fees will just fall off. I think also, in some sense, people get what you pay for, where you pay for the value that we bring to the table. So overall, yes, technology is there to enable, maybe to remove frictions, to improve efficiencies, but then it also helps us as humans add our value to manage risk, seek outperformance, seek better outcomes. So again, I think it becomes a bit more of a nuanced conversation. It's not as simple just to say that fees will just fall off as a very flat statement. I think with time and as we see these technologies improve, it'll be an interesting arc over the next few years.
Maybe AI is the new sexy passive. That's a conversation for another day. I think one last question to wrap up.
Mm-hmm.
As a trustee, if I was sitting in a trustee meeting and one of my managers was in the room and talking about AI, what would be the one question that I should be asking to interrogate the application and the use of this for my retirement fund?
Oh, such an important point, Natalie. And that's also one that I think about often. And even as us as managers on the other side of the table, it's something that we think about because at the end of the day, it's about how do we use these technologies to unlock value. And unlocking value can take different forms. Can we improve our risk management for clients? Can we maybe simulate or analyze market conditions or macroeconomic scenarios better? Can we find alpha or outperformance? So there's so many different ways to think about this. And for us, I think a very pertinent question that trustees would have to ask and be aware of is who are you partnering with? And in the sense of, are your managers able to use these technologies? Do they have the right skill sets in their businesses? Do their investment teams think along these lines, these progressive lines? Because at the end of the day, with all of these technologies, it's about adoption. As it is, we sit in South Africa, and in some sense, we do tend to be on the back foot versus the rest of the world. America, the EU are quite advanced. There's more capital flow, there's more advancement in these spaces. So it just means it's more difficult for us to keep abreast and keep up. And within that space, there are those managers who are able to and who are putting in the effort, whether it be hiring the right skill sets in their teams, right? Whether it might mean putting the right capital and deploying the right capital to build infrastructure correctly. So these are the questions that I think are important to ask of your partners, your investment managers, because that will tell you, are those teams set up to best leverage the technology of today? And if that answer is no, then that's a question mark. And that's really what should be interrogated.
So I guess it's not even a case of are we using AI or not anymore? That question is a year ago already.
Exactly.
This is more around the responsible use of that AI.
That's it. That's it.
Chetan, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for spending time with me and sharing your thoughts. And I really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll touch base again on another interesting topic.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie, for having me. It really was a great chat.
Thanks, Chetan.